And I had won the Southern United States Gymnastics Championships for all-around gymnast in the senior division, and didn't even have a gymnastics team. It was kind of like I self-trained myself. And the thing is, so I'm doing gymnastics one day in this gymnasium, and in walks this yogi, you know, in robes. You know, I mean, he was from India, you know, with the turban and robes. No, I can't. I'm not sure how I look. I mean, wait a minute. Photographic memory. Anyway, it was obviously from India, and he was dressed in Indian clothes. And he came and he said that he was sent to me. And I said, why? And he said, well, I'm sent to give you a mantra. And he said, as soon as I give you the mantra, I am returning to India. So I said, okay, you know, fine, you know, I'm willing. And so he took me to, he had a room, he had a little room he rented, and he took me to the room, and he gave me a mantra, and then he packed up his bags and went back to India again. And so he told me to do this mantra every day, so I did this mantra, and he told me how to resonate it in your body, and it's profound. And I'm going to tell you about the mantra because, and it's a simple mantra. Everyone has probably heard of it anyway by now, but back then, mantras weren't very well known because Maharishi hadn't hit the scene. And I mean, you know, when Maharishi started giving people mantras, that's when everyone started hearing about mantras. But before that, not very many Westerners knew about mantras and about chanting and, you know, things like that. So the mantra he gave me is profound because, and the way he told me to recite it. But the mantra was Hari Om Namom Shivaya, and which is not a secret kind of thing. But anyway. But he told me that the way to do it, he says, is to resonate it throughout your body. And he told me how to pronounce it so that the resonance moved through my entire body, into my sinus cavities, and back through my body again. And he told me to lie on my back, and this is how he told me to do it. And this is profound because it's like you've never heard this mantra before if you do it this way. But anyway, it was, let's see. Hari Om Namom Shivaya. Anyway, as you do it, you can actually feel the resonance move through your body, up into your sinuses, back down through your body again. And especially when it's resonating in your sinuses, he said that it resonates this membrane between your brain and the third and fourth ventricles of the brain, vibrating the spinal fluid, stimulating your pineal gland. And there's also another thing that you can do where you put your hands like this, like they're in prayer. You put your fingers on your nose and you go, Hari Om Namom Shivaya. And happen in there. You get very high when you do that. But and so that's how he taught me, and he worked with me until I was like resonating properly, and then he went back to India. I'll never know. He said, well, you know, next time someone will come to see you again when you next need, you know, another one. And of course that didn't happen yet, though. So I guess that one was all right for me. But So anyway, so that was happening, you know, at the same time that all these other things were happening, kind of coincidentally, kind of a parallel processing kind of thing. So we have you know, yoga and chemistry and physics and Dr. Coanda and government think tanks and all kinds of things happening like simultaneously in my life. And also, well, anyway. So I began my research on water, and the first thing I did is I treated water. I studied everything I could on water, and I treated water with high voltage fields. You know, like for example, one of the first things I did is I built like a real thin water container, and I put metal plates on each side of it like this, you know, and then I hooked up a neurophone to it, you know, and then I started playing different frequencies to that water, you know, with high voltage. And then that was high voltage AC, and then I would bias it. I put like 100,000 volts DC across that, you know, to create a high voltage electrical field and modulate that, and then I'd put magnets on it and all kinds of things. I experimented with every way of creating water that you could imagine. And I made this very thin. In other words, it was like a real thin, very large container, you know, with just a thin wall of water in between, and thin walls and high voltage and so forth. And I was able to create water that had some of the characteristics that Dr. Coanda identified using the techniques that I developed. The only problem was, and I also worked with vortexes, you know, with creating water, you know, in a perfect liquid vortex. And you know, and water is very interesting because when you have a vortex like this, if you look down the throat of the vortex from above, as the water spins and gets smaller and smaller and smaller, as the vortex gets smaller, there's a tube, a thin tube, that starts out being, say, 3 inches in diameter up here. And by the time it gets down here, it's a millionth of an inch in diameter, but there's still a tiny hollow tube running through the center of the water vortex. And right down here, I did the same thing. You know, I put high voltage across it and magnets and all kinds of things, experimenting with vortexes and various things. And I was able to change water profoundly using some of these techniques. In fact, I was able to create water that could be identified as Hansa water using some of these techniques. And of course, Betty Lee Morales, who was a good friend of mine, who was a person well known in the health field. She had Eden Ranch in Topanga Canyon and was quite well known for her, you know, health practices and so forth. Had a lot of big movie stars coming to her ranch and cleansing and doing fasting and so forth. Well, Betty Morales was a friend of the King of Hansa, and she went to the King of Hansa, and he gave her a bunch of water for me. And I still have a sample of Hansa water that's over 40 years old, and that sample of Hansa water still has all the characteristics that Dr. Coanda, you know, told me about way back. So but the problem with creating water using these field devices at that time was basically that the water didn't stay. That is, the changes that he described, the anomalous physical properties that he described, didn't last. In other words, I could take and create something that was similar to Hansa water, and I could like vigorously shake that water or stir it, or take a Tesla coil and discharge a lightning bolt to the top of the water, to the surface of the water, and all that change that I had observed disappeared. It was gone, completely gone. And so I was looking for something, a way of treating water that would last, like my 40-year-old sample of Hansa water would stay changed. And so, anyway, after years and years and years of research, discovered that there was a special mineral in the water, a tiny, tiny little mineral, only 5 nanometers in diameter. 5 nanometers is very, very small. But it's an insulator, and it's made out of silica, which is, silica is actually the same thing that sand is made out of. Silica is the same thing that this window is made out of, basically. But these are little tiny silica minerals. Now, Hansa water is just like distilled water. It's like rainwater. It has no minerals in it. That is, no conductive minerals, no mineral salts. And basically, but it comes from a glacier. In fact, all the 5 places Dr. Coanda talked about came from glaciers. Ancient glaciers, millions of years old. And these ancient glaciers are ice blue glaciers. That is, if you look at them in the sunlight, they're ice blue in color. Nanga Parbat is the mountain next to Hansaland that has the biggest ice blue glacier on it. And they get a lot of their water from Nanga Parbat. But basically, in that water are these tiny minerals that don't dissolve, particles, and they have a very high negative electrical charge around them. And they, I mean, if you were to, when we talk about electrical charge, we talk about volts per meter. For example, if you took 2 electrical plates, you know, and you put them 1 meter apart, and you put a battery across those plates, then you would have an electrical field in between the plates of 1 1/2 volts per meter, 1.5 volts per meter. Now, we know that if you make those plates into points and start moving the points close together, that the voltage concentrates from a broad area down to a little narrow point, and as you move the plates closer together, you'll get an electrical discharge, and you can actually measure voltage by taking needle points and moving them together and seeing at what spark gap distance they actually arc and so forth. But we know that volts per meter is very, voltage field potential is very important. For example, in the body, our cell membranes have only about 1/10 of a volt across the cell membrane. But if you measure the thickness of the cell membranes, the actual volts per meter is like, if you were to multiply that, it have about 100,000 volts per meter in potential across our cell membranes, because it's 1/10 of a volt, but the distance is so small that if you were to multiply that to a meter, you get 100,000 volts per meter. So anyway, if you take these little mineral particles that are in Hansa water and you measure the voltage, they have about a minus 140 millivolts or 0.14 volt potential, negative, on the surface of the particle. But because it's 5 nanometers is hard to conceive of in size, but it's so small that it's almost 2,000 times smaller than a red blood cell. And so if you measure this potential and the surface area and the radius of this particle, this particle actually has a potential of millions of volts per meter across it, across this particle. And so basically, these little particles of minerals do something to the water molecules, line the little water molecules up like magnets, and change the structure of water. And that's why Hansa water, that's why the people in Hansa land live so long. That's why Hansa water is so incredible. That's why it has all the anomalous physical properties. That's why you can't get rid of them, because these particles are permanently in the water. I mean, even if you distill the water, some of these particles go across the distillation process. You can't filter them out with reverse osmosis. So once these particles are in the water, they pretty much change the water forever. I mean, you know, it's pretty hard to get rid of the change. And so that's why my little bottle of Hansa water lasts so long. So I started trying to duplicate these particles, and that's a whole other story in itself. But basically, after about 30 years, we discovered a way of creating these particles, and it became a whole new technology, which is now known as microcluster technology and so forth. But I'm not really, I mean, this is Mother's Day. I've talked too much about this already, but I think, anyway. But basically, we did what Dr. Coanda wanted us to do. We developed these little tiny drops that you put in water called crystal energy, and when you add it to water, it changes the water, and you drink it and you feel better. And then developed, we also discovered that Hansa water had this ion in it, negatively charged ionized hydrogen, which has a whole different effect on the body. And we discovered how to create that. Now we have a product called microhydrin, which is performing, we're getting virtually miracles from microhydrin, because it's one of the most incredible antioxidants ever made. So a whole new technology came out of what Dr. Coanda gave me so many years ago. Yes?
How does this relate to the micro water that's produced with
Well, micro water has some negatively charged hydrogen ions in it. It's not... See, just because you can measure water with something called a redox potential meter, and you can measure, but you have to take the pH, the redox potential, and you plug it into a formula known as the Nernst equation, and then you can calculate how many actual H minus ions are in each cubic cc of water. And if you take a micro water machine, by the way, micro water machines are wonderful. Jim Karnstadt back here sells them. Where are you, Jim? Ah, there he is. Yeah, Jim sells them, by the way, and they're wonderful machines. But in fact, micro water is better than tap water. The thing is, with the new discovery of microhydrin, you just get more of this. In other words, you get like in one capsule of microhydrin, this product we have people now with micro water machines who are making micro water, adding microhydrin to it, and really getting a kick out of it. It stabilizes the micro water also. Yeah. Thank you, Jim. It's always good to have you here. And so micro water, I think, is a good thing, and especially if you combine it with some of these other things. Now, before we discovered microhydrin, we had people adding crystal energy to microwater, and that was also stabilizing it, helping to stabilize it. Because microwater, once you make microwater, the ions don't last very long, and they're gone, you know, within a pretty short period of time. And so, if you add crystal energy to it and or microhydrin, it stabilizes it for a long period of time, makes it much better. And so, all over the world now, there is so much interest in water, without going, you know, fully into it, except that now, like Dr. Popaninin here from Russia, he's one of the world's foremost water experts, and we've been talking about water, and he's made some amazing discoveries about water also. And there are Japanese scientists who just called the other day from Jim Karnstad, introduced me to him, who's doing the water thing and so forth. It seems that all over the world now, people are aware that water is where it's at. and special water, special crystals in water, like this new IE crystals that Dr. Popanin is investigating, and so forth. All of these things actually may be very similar. We're talking about very similar things, but basically, water is the most important thing we put on our body, truly. And I have Dr. Coanda to thank for that. And also the fact that when I was doing all this research as a you know, from 17 years old forward, and I was giving lectures all my life and talking about water and so forth, I was like planting seeds of interest in tens of thousands of people about water also, and national TV, and then I did a movie called The Outer Space Connection. How many of you remember the movie The Outer Space Connection? That was yeah, not very many, but back in the 70s, The Outer Space Connection was the first documentary that made it into the movie theaters. You know, in other words, it was shown in all the movie theaters like movies are now, but it was a documentary done by Alan Landsberg, and basically he interviewed me in it for about 45 minutes and talking about pyramid power, because I wrote the book Pyramid Power in the 1972, and it became, you know, real popular and so forth. So we did this movie, but water has become it in the world now. So we're all going to hear more and more and more about it. Yes.
I just have a question. There's been a discussion as to whether crystal energy is best to put in distilled water, or if you can put it in regular water.
Yes, it is. It is best to put in distilled water, because what we're doing is we're changing water, the structure of water, at a micromolecular, at level, and mineral ions interfere with that action. They actually short the electric field out and prevent it from doing its job, or they lessen its effect. And remember, Hunza water is equivalent to pure distilled water. It has no dissolved minerals in it, except for the kind of mineral we're talking about, these little insoluble minerals like microhydrin crystal energy. So it's definitely best to use it in distilled or reverse osmosis water in that case.
I want to mention here that I've been doing some experiments on distilled water. It's important if you can get your water in the hardest possible plastic if you don't have a distillery yourself, because the leaching of your organochlorine through the water takes the pH down as low as 4. Those are all organochlorines, which are known carcinogens. So.
And it becomes acid water, right? When he says hard plastic, we're talking about high density polyethylene or PET. PET is polycarbonates, right? Polycarbonates are good plastics for water.
And Nalgene.
Nalgene? Mm-hmm.
They find that at camping stores.
Nalgene, right. Okay, thank you, Jim. Yes? Just a minute. Go, you first.
Work with the Schwenk's drop picture
Yes.
water testing. How does that
Schwenk.
work with your,
Well, I did my own Schwenk drop test. Most of you don't know what Schwenk drop test is, but basically Dr. Theodore Schwenk was the head chemist for Weleda Laboratories in Switzerland, and also a world guy on water, but he was into the Rudolf Steiner school of thinking and so forth, and much more esoteric. But one of the things, if you were to look at at a flat surface of water directly from the side, and you drop a drop of water into that water, it forms like ripples, a pattern, a ripple pattern. And what Dr. Schwenk discovered, he put a little glycerin in the water, and then he projected that with an overhead projector or something, onto a wall, and then when you drop water into it, by looking at the pattern formed, he could tell if the water was polluted or if it was good to drink. He could tell if it had, and he was measuring esoteric things. He was, for example, he could take 2 samples of distilled water and test them, and one of them would give this beautiful mandala pattern on the surface, and yet the other one would look muddy, it would look bad. And basically, we're now learning that water also holds memory of elements. For example, you can put toxins in water, remove the toxins, but the memory of the toxin is still there, even though there's no toxin left, and that water will give you a muddy picture. So, I mean, these things get, it's getting wild. Okay, yeah, you were saying. Okay.
I talked to you long ago about those back in the 60s, maybe. Have you got any experience yet with filtering the water, like using a blue bottle or an apple bottle?
Oh, sure.
Or a red bottle? No matter what the structure is of the water, when you put it in.
Oh yeah, I've done a lot of work with colors, and water. But the thing you have to remember with colors and water is that colored bottles aren't necessarily what they look like. You have to actually look at the color with a spectroscope to see what the colors really are, because something that looks blue to you or me may not really be blue, or something that looks red may not really be red. It has lots of other colors in it. But I've done work with monochromatic light and water and lasers and water and so forth, and they do have effects, but they aren't lasting. They're not lasting. I mean, and I don't even know what the effects mean, but there are some effects, but the effects are not lasting. Yes?
About just storing water in glass bottles?
Well, glass bottles work, but water dissolves glass, but glass is okay because it's silica. It depends on what the glass is made out of, again. Like a good quality crystal, I mean not lead crystal, good quality quartz crystal glass, or a good quality Pyrex glass bottles are good. But you wouldn't want to store it in lead crystal glass, for example, because you get all that lead in the water, because water dissolves glass very easily. And when you store water in glass, the glass leaches in, which is okay because silica is good for us, as long as it's good glass. Yes.
Yeah, 2 questions. Have you seen with crystal energy liquid or the microhydrogen, have you looked at a machine to show whether it shows mandalas? And
Oh yeah, well I have.
And do you have it?
Makes nice mandalas.
Do you have, is any in any of the literature that we could get a hold of? And the second question is, has somebody taken a Carillion photography shot
Oh,
before
yeah.
and then after with products?
You must be. Are you a Royal Body Care distributor?
Yeah.
No, thought so.
Well, I'm also interested in-
No, I know. I'm.
interested in all of this
Yeah.
because
Okay. Boy, first of all, we did test with crystal energy, and yes, it does create beautiful mandalas when you use the drop test, and also the Carillion photographs. Dr. Peter Kokoshineg in Austria had the most sophisticated Carillion photography device in the world. He spent about $1.5 million on it. It was an amazing device, and he did test with it and showed very exciting changes in water from crystal energy. And then there's a doctor in Germany that we visited recently who does medical diagnostic tests using Carillion photography for physicians. And basically, I went over to his house one day, and he wanted to test me, and so he tested me. I put my fingers on this little plate, and he did a Carillion test, and then he got very upset, and he just wouldn't talk anymore, and we had to leave. So I didn't know what he discovered from my aura, but he got really weird. So I left. I mean, we left his house, and 2 days later he came to my lecture in Munich, and he was smiling. And so he said he was very sorry to have been so rude and so forth, but he said that normally when he examines people, he finds about 60 things wrong with them, 60 things. And he said he only found 2 or 3 things wrong with me, and he said, and none of them were bad. And that upset him. And then he said, and the other thing I couldn't understand is that he said, your male and female energies are perfectly balanced, and that's impossible. So, I don't know. But, no, it's the water. It's the water. Yes.
Reverse reverse osmosis is just as good as distilled water? If you add, so that you don't have to go to all that problem distilling your water?
Reverse osmosis water is good, yes. Yeah. In fact, some of the best water in the world comes from reverse osmosis water. The problem with distilled water, there is one major problem, and that's why the FDA will not allow distilled water to be used in kidney dialysis, is that water distillers do not prevent bacteria from going through the distillation process. If you have bacteria polluted water and distill it, you'll have bacteria in the distilled water. And reverse osmosis water filtration can filter out all bacteria. They run it through reverse osmosis through a 0.2 or 0.1 micron filter, and which will eliminate any bacteria or virus from actually getting. Even though their virus is smaller than that, we now know that a virus that passed through a 0.1 micron filter is inactive. It's inactivated. It no longer has any effect. And so the FDA only allows reverse osmosis water. Now, I personally use reverse osmosis water because in my lab I use huge quantities of water. I used to use distilled water, but also I have a system that actually double reverse osmosis treats the water and then runs it through a series of filters to eliminate every single. I mean, it's like ultra pure water. It's the kind of water that you can inject. They call it injection grade water, or the kind of water you can create pharmaceutical injections out of and things like that. Yes.
Does microhydrogen or crystal energy clean up ordinary water?
Well, does it clean up ordinary water? Well, depends on what's wrong with that water. But now, ordinary water, like city water, has about 2,000 or 3,000 chemicals in it, at least. I mean, some waters have more than that. They did a study of Houston tap water, and they said after examining Houston tap water, we found that the number one ingredient is water. The number two ingredient was toilet paper, and then it got worse. Oh, that's bad. But this was a true analysis of Houston tap water. So even though municipalities will tell you our water is perfectly safe for everyone to drink, they aren't looking at anything but the fact that it won't, give you diarrhea or or make you like physically ill. That is immediately when you drink it. I mean, because they say it's potable water, but potable water means that it can contain thousands of carcinogens. It can contain that they never test for. It can contain frequencies or vibrations that they've never heard of. Like if you go to a municipality water engineer and you start talking about the Schwenk drop test, he'll go to, pardon? Oh, Schwenk, S-C-H-W-E-N-K, S-C-H-W-E-N-K, Schwenk, Dr. Theodore Schwenk. Theodore.
That's why you
have
a
heart
wonderful problem.
One of my favorite books is his. It's called Sensitive Chaos.
Fatty acids. That's why
Jim
you're
just
sick.
mentioned, S-E-N, Sensitive
Needed for the heart.
Chaos. It's one of the most wonderful books I've ever read because, I mean, it's poetic, this book. This is poetry in motion. It talks about, well, when you see the book, you'll know what I mean, but it's a wonderful book. Author, Theodore Schwenk. Field's Bookstore. Well, okay. Well, I don't want to focus totally on crystal energy. How many people here are totally just interested in following this line of interest? I mean, just raise your hand. I'm curious. Okay. And how many people would like to know other stuff too? I mean, okay, good. Okay. Well, and plus the same ones. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Okay. First of all, these things are not medicines, number one. Although water is your best medicine. But that water, I'm not talking about the specific water, water is your best medicine. But the best water you can drink is what you want. And the very best water you can drink is water that has these characteristics that Dr. Coanda described to me. And in my opinion at the moment, I mean, there may be other discoveries and things coming around, and I'm doing constant water research and improving. You know, like, you know, since we developed Crystal Energy, I mean, water has changed. Even that product has changed tremendously over the years. I keep improving it, but basically, we have with microhydrin. I mean, we're having all kinds of wonderful, and with people being aware of water and what it does to the body, we're getting all kinds of miraculous things happening with it. We have people, you know, who have been stung by, you know, scorpions and deadly spiders and snakes and all kinds of things, who take microhydrin, who didn't even get sick after that, because a lot of the venoms used by insects and snakes and spiders and so forth, they cause your body to dump electrons immediately in your urine, and that's why well, anyway, I'll get back to that in a minute. But
how much microhydrin might they take when they're stung like that?
well, personally, I would take like 12 a day if I was stung by something really bad. But this one lady who was hit by a scorpion in Arizona, she was taking 3 a day, 3 capsules a day, 1 in the morning, noon, night, for 3 days before it happened. And then she woke up in the middle of the night with a sting on her face, slapped her face. You know, she felt something, and when she slapped, she felt something gooey, you know, and she woke up and it was a scorpion. She had killed a scorpion that had stung her face on it. And that's a bad place to get stung. Any place close to your brain is a bad place to get bitten or stung because of the easy access of the toxin to your brain. And so she knew, because she had been stung years before by a scorpion, same type of scorpion, a bark scorpion, and she knew that she was going to be sick for about a week and feel like she had the flu for a week and just drag around with no energy. And it might be worse because she was much older. So she called 911. The minute she knew it was a scorpion, they said, "We're sending an ambulance." And while she was waiting for the ambulance, she felt this warm, like a current flowing from her body, you know, right to the bite mark, and it got real hot. The bite mark got real hot, swelled up, went down, swelling disappeared. The lymph gland under her arm swelled up and went down, all within 15 minutes. And when the ambulance arrived, they did her vital signs and said, "You're in perfect shape, lady. You don't need anything." And they examined the scorpion and said, "Yes, you've been stung by a scorpion, but we don't understand why you're in good shape." And she tried to tell them about the microhydrin, but of course, you know.
She hadn't taken any extra?
No extra. She had just been taking it 3 days before it happened, just 3 times a day. But the nice thing about it is that we now have a few medical clinics that are using microhydrin in their emergency rooms. Sedona Medical Center is using it in their emergency room now. As you know, when someone comes in and they've been bitten, they immediately give them microhydrin. And it's a first aid. See, this is not a medicine. Again, you have to differentiate. This is not a medicine. This is a nutritious product. It's a nutrient. But we now know that we can use certain nutrients as part of first aid remedies, for example, as just part of what we do. Okay, I'm going to stop questions just for the moment and go on and move on, and then I'll answer more questions about microhydrin and stuff as we move along. This is Mother's Day, you know, and we must give out the mothers in here. Believe me, Sai Baba says that, which is an interesting thing. I love the works of Sai Baba, and because he says more in a single sentence than most of us say in a year in talking. But Sai Baba said something very interesting. Sai Baba says that we have to honor our parents above all, because they brought us into the world. And he said no matter how bad they've been as parents or how good they've been as parents, we owe them our complete respect for that, because he says that our life is the most precious thing that we've been given, and it's not given easily. You know, a lot of us think that because there are so many people on Earth, and you know, we have such a big population explosion and everything, that life isn't worth very much. But believe me, apparently it's because they're just, it's getting harder and harder, you know, to find a body to begin born into. And so being given life, especially in today's world at this time, is one of the most precious things that we can be given.
Life giver.
And so anyway,
You're gonna do.
I'm too sensitive, but thank you. But